On this episode of Postcards.
You know, when you come to the Donnelly Threshing Bee, you really see the past.
One of the things we most miss is a sense of community, and a sense of community that is really intense.
Everybody pitched in, and from young to old.
This program on Pioneer Public Television is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008. Additional support provided by Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHillFarm.org. Live Wide Open, a regional movement that encourages people to make a great life for themselves in west central Minnesota. More at livewideopen.com. Alexandria, Minnesota, a year-round destination with hundreds of lakes, trails, and attractions for memorable vacations and events. More information at explorealex.com.
It's a community get-together. It's where our community really comes together and remembers our past history in the farming industry. And they still shock grain, and we thresh it every year, which I think it's very important to remember our agricultural history because we're so far from where we were. But I think it's important to remember where we've came from. And it's like a big family reunion. Everybody comes home for the bee.
The Donnelly Threshing Bee really got started when they were going to have this as a fundraiser project for West Central Homes. And that really that ran a couple years, and they found out it wasn't going too good. And then it was dropped for a year, and then the Donnelly Commercial Club took over and has run it. And this is our 52nd year at it. So I guess we must be doing something right.
It's a community event, and the thrashing is a small part of it. But most farmers that run big combines now like to see how it used to be done by hand. And some young guys like to pitch the bundles and see how it used to be and how much better it is today.
I think I was chairman a few years, but our church then worked with it, and all the women, men and women, children, and all ages helped with the threshing bee, and that's how we became known here in the Donnelly Threshing Bee.
I think we are drawn to the past, and I think we're drawn to celebrate the past because we examine our lives today and we see things that are missing.
You know, when you come to the Donnelly Threshing Bee, you really see the past. And for a lot of people, a lot of young people, they don't understand that past because they're not going to Grandma and Grandpa's farm. Grandma and Grandpa maybe don't have a farm anymore. And so the only way that they can be exposed to hands-on, real-life experiences is, you know, at the Donnelly Threshing Bee.
It's home. It's about 30 miles from the little bump in the side of Minnesota. And it's a very small community, about 215 people, but it's a very generous community.
Donnelly? Well, if people ask that, I'll say 45 miles west of Alexandria or 10 miles north of Morris, Minnesota, or 100 miles south of Fargo.
People are paying more attention, I think, to rural. And there's a lot of people that like to live in the rural area, too. You know, people are working in Morris and living in Donnelly, or living in Herman and working in Morris. I think Donnelly itself, of course, it used to have, a couple of grocery stores and a creamery and all those kind of things. But I think, the businesses that are here are very important to sustain itself. The co-op, you really need to be able to buy fertilizer, to get it spread, to get the insecticides and all that kind of stuff. So, the businesses that are here really do keep this community going.
It's a warm and welcoming community. It's a great place to live and a really great place to raise your kids.
I think we do this so it's not forgotten, because our younger generation is so busy in doing what they need to do, make a living, and raising their family. They're not taking the time to check that out on their own. So we provide this opportunity for them to come and see how we used to live.
Because I think with the kids of today, it could possibly be a lost art someday. It's already declined a little bit. It used to be, back in the day, it was probably the social event of the summer. I mean, we just looked forward to the Threshing Bee. Not that we don't now, we do, but it's so few less people, but it's important for the community to come together. It's a great resource for the commercial club and all that they do for all the things in Donnelly.
There's a lot of families that come home for it, see other friends, family. So it's kind of a family and community get together.
I think they thought it was just something for all of us to know more about the tractors, the farming, the people, the churches, how they could work together.
Rural communities tend to be church-centered. Regardless of where you are in this country, they are church-centered communities. Primarily it's a way of bringing the community together, but it's also a way of socializing young people.
The church was the big social thing in the area because we had functions, we had Luther League night, and families came. And we had 4th of July was just a huge success, and they had this barn out at our church and sold all the pop candy and that, and they had ball games and many different kinds of ball games for younger, for older. It was just great.
It was for your religion, for your Christian life, but it was also your social, completely. Yeah, and we did that not only on Sunday, but we were friends through thick and thin.
Well, without the churches, you wouldn't have a lot to eat unless you got the local corn dog guy to come in or something. And I think that, what they offer is a nice diversity. The St. Charles Catholic Church from Herman has the hamburgers and things like that a lot of kids like, and, adults too, of course. And then the sweet shop has, pie and donuts and ice cream, and you always need a little bit of that. And Consfinger always has their meals. They start out on Saturday. Today we had pork chops and baked potatoes and green beans and, wonderful relish trays, everything fresh from the garden. And so many people will come through on Sunday, especially for the scalloped potatoes. It's like, wow. And Consfinger kind of has a little thing about their scalloped potatoes. They don't get scalloped potatoes like that anymore. It's kind of like at Christmas time when people have lutefisk or something. Those scalloped potatoes are made with real potatoes and real cream and nice bone-in ham. And so, they're able to eat, and we all say our senses connect us to the past with memories also. And so it provides, I think, a homemade meal that you just don't get in a drive-through anymore.
That's one of my favorite things about the Threshing Bee is the open-air church service on Sunday morning, because everyone comes to worship together as a community, and I really love that about the Bee. And I love that about our community, because it's always, from as far back as I can remember, it's always been all of the churches working together to make sure that that church service happens, and they all play a role in it, and they just work together, which is kind of cool, which really I think is representative of our whole community, is when something needs to get done, we work together to make it get done. So I was a princess many years ago, and so I think that's really good for the girls to get that exposure to go to the other towns and meet the other girls and kind of widen their world a little bit. I think that's really good for them.
These girls ride and they've got like their queen, and they've got little princesses, and the girls are really excited about when they, have their nice dresses on and they get judged. And the thing is, they represent Donnelly and the Threshing Bee, and I think I heard like 14 different parades. So you just imagine, that presence is being brought to 14 different communities. Our daughter was a queen, and she represented again, the Donnelly area. Being on stage, being interviewed, they certainly gain confidence from that. And then I think the other extension is going into communities, talking to other people. One of our little princesses, in the case Addison, she helped with our fundraiser that we did for the food shelf. And it was really nice to see her there. She was representing Donnelly. She was helping, mingling with the community and the people. And that's a real gift to give a young child, to be able to communicate with all kinds of ages and to be able to bring about a real purpose. So that's a very important thing that they have here.
Yeah, there's probably, I suppose, in some families, the ones who've been coming for years, there might be 4 generations out here, which is great. But even if there's only 2, better yet. I mean, just to keep the connection, that's huge. That's huge.
I like to come and just visit with the people.
My grandson is here from northern Minnesota. This is his deal. He loves to come to the Threshing Bee. We don't have any, we have old tractors on our farm, but we don't have any old. And he's full of questions, and how did they work, and how did you possibly get the work done with those little tractors compared to what we have now? I think it's important for kids to realize just how, not just farming, but how the world evolves.
Well, it's our heritage. I would think if you interviewed every person that's here, either their parents or their grandparents or maybe their great-parents or great-grandparents, maybe even the wife's side of the family, somebody's been involved in agriculture in the Midwest. Contrary to growing up in New York or LA or someplace like that. It's just what we're about.
Most of the people that arrive here initially, sort of the charter members of the communities out here, were immigrants or children of immigrants, and they had settled originally, or their parents had settled originally in southeastern Minnesota, northeastern Iowa, southwestern Wisconsin. And the push factors had to do with just not enough land and not enough opportunity. This is actually a contested land, at least where we're sitting right now. What I mean by that is that it did not necessarily belong to the Anishinaabe or the Ojibwe people or the Dakota people. This was territory that was sort of a border between the two.
My kids are the 6th generation to live on our farm, and so they settled here in 1869. And I can only imagine what it was like for her to break new ground and eke out a living in a new community without anyone close. The closest neighbor that could speak Norwegian, we have Norwegian descent, the closest Norwegian neighbor was up by Herman, so it's about 10 miles away.
People are looking for opportunities, and mainly it's parents and children, often children coming of age. And part of what motivates people to immigrate in general is this desire to sort of reproduce or replicate a kind of lifestyle that was already at risk in Europe and come out here, be able to establish a farm, be independent, be autonomous, but then also able to set up your kids. The process by which towns and villages were plotted, developed out here varied a lot. So early on, before the railroad, you would see a lot of places developed because they were alongside a river. Out here, this is largely railroads. And so you would see a specific distance, 8 to 9 miles between all the little towns, which has to do with providing water stops for the trains, but also it had to do with people calculating the distance in which a farmer could travel per day by horse and wagon in order to do their marketing.
Years ago, the railroad came through, and that was a big deal. And I think it's even named after a guy who was connected with the railroads.
Development would not have occurred out here without the railroad, and it would not have occurred when it occurred and the way that it occurred. And it's also really responsible for sort of the interesting ethnic mix that you see out here. You have Scandinavians, you have Germans, you have Irish, but the railroad is incredibly important. So the development of agriculture out here occurs in phases. Things are still horse-powered to a large extent up until turn of the century, 1900 or so. And then there's sort of a slow transition, first to steam and then to gasoline. But it is very labor intensive regardless.
The newest tractor I had was 1937. Only had one tractor with rubber tires. All the others were with steel wheels, see. Well, see, that's the thing, gone, you see.
And central to a kind of mixed agricultural regime is dairy. It's not a lot of machines that you can use early on when you're milking cows. You're milking cows by hand, and you're toting that product by hand also, or you're loading it into wagons and hauling it into town. People have reapers that are horse-powered. They have horse-powered threshers. They have more efficient plows than what was known a century earlier or so. But mechanization is a slow, ongoing process. And it makes life easier for farmers as it occurs. But it also changes the nature of community, because a lot of the labor early on is obviously family-based, but also community-based. I mean, there is this really interesting reality out here, well, throughout rural America, of rural neighborhoods.
We all had to work together. I know I did a lot of field work, raised kids, done some chores.
There's this early fascination with wheat. And it's not that people are greedy, it's because they've had to borrow money in order to get a crop, in order to build a house, in order to build outbuildings, to do all these kinds of things. And wheat is hard on the land. And people are uncomfortable being that dependent upon a single crop. So there is a kind of transition to a more flexible, more diversified, more mixed farming kind of regime in which people are doing all kinds of different things. They're doing small grains, they're doing corn, although out here, originally corn is kind of problematic. But they're doing cattle, they're doing pigs, they're doing some sheep, they're doing all these different kinds of things. It allows them to be really pretty flexible in regards to the market. So price of oats go down, you feed it to your horses.
Well, you had your bundle haulers, and you had the guys that operated the thrashing rig, the guys that run the steam engine or the gas, however but most of them was all steam, and that took a crew to run that engine. And then you had your grain haulers, so it amounted to a lot of people.
You know, they talk about the threshing crews that used to go from one farm to the next, and you know, I'm not old enough to remember that, but I do remember bringing lunch to the field, and that was just such a neat family time where you ate lunch in the field, and you felt more connected to the land.
My dad had steam rig and stuff, you know, so, and a big thrash rig years ago.
You know, I think, you know, when we were growing up on it, that there's probably a little cliche somewhere about, you know, you don't really know you've got it bad off. And you didn't, because, you know, you always had good food. I mean, We always had really good food from the garden. We had chickens, we had cattle. So food, was a big deal. If you got a full gut, you're not, you don't think you're having too many problems.
It was pretty much kind of a little more self-sufficient. You had you raised your own meat, hogs, cattle, and you had for probably milking cows. You had your own milk, chickens, eggs. So you were pretty much self-sufficient.
Well, when we first got married, we raised about everything.
And I think that one of the things we most miss is a sense of community, and a sense of community that is really intense. You actually had to rely on people. You had to depend upon people, and you not only got together to bend an elbow and have a drink or two or whatever, or to have coffee, but you got together in order to do work, in order to accomplish something that was meaningful, in order to accomplish something that made a difference. I think we miss that. I think we miss shared work.
Everybody pitched in, and from young to old, helping with milking cows and had a big garden, canned everything, and we had chickens and eggs, and so we didn't run to town every time you needed something. It was done at home.
What women were actually doing, and they were doing everything from shoveling manure to helping plow to working on the harvest to milking, essentially doing everything. And so women and kids are sort of this reserve army, right? That they do whatever needs to be done.
The kids took care of the garden and did and then there was a lot of canning.
There wasn't a lot of clothes. There certainly wasn't fashion design clothes, but nobody else had it either. So you didn't feel like you were cheated on anything.
I think social change in the past 40 years has been incredibly significant in rural communities. And I think rural communities have been dealt a double blow. It's the closing of schools or the consolidation of schools. And it's also what's happened to Main Street. But science and technology feed into this. The Green Revolution, which modernizes agriculture around the globe, all obviously has an influence here with all kinds of new technologies in terms of machinery, but also in terms of chemicals. And so people get big and they get efficient, but they also, more and more tend to a kind of monoculture, which has an impact, on the land, but also has an impact on rural communities.
Our rural community has really shrunk with the bigger farms, combines, tractors. Guy can take care of more acres himself. He doesn't need the neighbor to help him out one way or the other.
It used to be more of a family business, and today it's more of a big business.
Farmers are very cautious, intellectual individuals. You used to think about farmers being, if you graduated from country school and you had an 8th grade education, that's all you had to have to be a farmer. Today, you have to be well enough educated that you can do your marketing, you know how to do your financing, you know what interest rates are going to do for you. So it's a complex business, but I'll tell you what, there's no greater people in the world than the farmers that we work with.
I think these kinds of celebrations, like the Donnelly Threshing Bee, is important to everybody, primarily because we were born in the country. This is who we are.
A lot of the guys that are retired farmers today remember sitting on some of this old equipment hour after hour with no cab, nothing to protect them from the sun or the elements or the cold weather when they're plowing in November. And if they stayed in farming long enough, or their sons are in farming, they see the new modern air-conditioned cabs that there are, and everything is comfortable. And I think they reminisce looking at, boy, did I spend a lot of hours. And if it's an old M or an A John Deere, or no matter what it is, it seems as though if they grew up with red equipment or yellow equipment or green equipment, it's near and dear to their heart.
We weren't born in New York or Boston or Philadelphia. We were born in the country, and we moved to the city. And when you move to the city, you don't leave everything behind.
Kids don't realize that necessarily. This opens a lot of eyes to young kids.
Relevant is the key. You know, I think there's a big industrial push towards farm to table, you know, so I think that's a direction that we could probably go, where people can use this kind of a medium to educate, you know, where their food comes from.
Kids have opportunities to go to all kinds of places and things, but I think, you know, connecting with the past seems to be the most important thing.
I think we should leave them understand how it was back then. They can only dream of what they see, but it's interesting.
Visit pioneer.org/postcards to catch up on missed episodes and to find out more about your favorite segments. This program on Pioneer Public Television is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008. Additional support provided by Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHillFarm.org. Live Wide Open, a regional movement that encourages people to make a great life for themselves in west central Minnesota. More at livewideopen.com. Alexandria, Minnesota, a year-round destination with hundreds of lakes, trails, and attractions for memorable vacations and events. More information at explorealex.com.